Hey, Papa, guess what?
What?
I need new clothes. Baby needs new clothes.
Where do you think we could go find some cool designs to wear?
Oh, I think I have an idea. I mean, we've got some awesome designs for people to wear.
Oh, I didn't think about that. You go over to our website. What is that one again? It's tpublic.com/fostercarenation. Yeah, I think we got t-shirts and tank tops and hoodies and sweatshirts and
baby onesies.
They don't have any dad-sized onesies there, do they?
I don't think so, but the baby onesies are super adorable.
Yeah, they are. They even got some kids' hoodies and short sleeve t-shirts, long sleeve t-shirts. Maybe we should go over there and check it out. Where's that again?
It's over at TeePublic, right?
Yeah.
Foster Care Nation?
Yeah, teepublic.com/fostercarenation.
You can forget a lot of things, Foster Care Nation, but never forget this. You're listening to Unparalleled Studios.
I signal.
Foster Care Nation, listen up. This is
Foster Care and Unparalleled Journey.
strength for the powerless, courage for the fearful, hope and healing for wounded hearts.
Hello and welcome back to Foster Care and Unparalleled Journey with Jason.
And Amanda.
And today we have Morgan Wolf with us. And for those of you who cannot see Morgan, I'm just going to suggest that maybe she might be wearing something a little bit different than your average person. Morgan, how are you doing today? And what is up with this super cool outfit that you happen to be wearing?
I'm doing well. It's nice to meet you guys. Well, I am currently at Miss Oklahoma for America Strong 2021.
That is awesome. That is awesome.
I do love the crown. I could use one of those.
Oh, thank you.
I could use one of them, but I don't think I would. I don't think it would fit my head quite right.
No, you can't be the queen.
It's adjustable. It's adjustable.
This is a pretty big head, I'm told. So at least that's what Amanda tells me.
Yeah.
I don't know if she means that, you know, literally or metaphorically or what. I think it's an insult. I'm not sure.
But anyways, that's really awesome.
So yeah. Well, we have you on here today, obviously, because you have a story that involves foster care and adoption and all that good stuff. And so we wanted to hear about your story. So tell us, how did you get involved in the system?
So my story is very unique. I actually found out very late in life that I myself went through foster care and adoption process. I went through 2 foster homes when I was little that I have no memory of. And then at 23 years old, I found out that I was adopted.
Oh, wow. 23 is fairly old. And I'd like to talk about how that maybe was a horrible decision by somebody. I don't know what your personal opinion is and all that, but you know, Amanda and I can speak to that just a little bit. Our oldest son, he had a different biological father and he bounced when he was little. And he's always known me as dad. He was 2 years old when I met him. He's always known me as dad. And how old was he when he called us that fateful phone call?
21.
So at 21 years old, he called us from some other state. I think Tennessee. He was in Tennessee. I was stationed in Tennessee at the time. And he said, I just got an interesting phone call. And it's like some guy called me and says he's my stepbrother. And, you know, we ended up having to have that whole conversation that we never had. We searched for years to find the right time to talk about that. And we never felt like we felt the right time. And then the time was pushed upon us. And fortunately for us and for him, you know, that we worked through all that. And that's been a wonderful, you know, part of our experience together, although it has its challenging moments when you have to deal with that. But it's turned out really well, better than we could have expected, because we didn't have a clue how to handle that. So I'm curious, in your own experience, how is that, you know, how does that experience been for you, finding out something so late in life that you had no clue about?
So definitely my adoptive mom and dad are in the same boat that you guys were. There really isn't that perfect time to say, hey, you know, you endured all this trauma when you were little and, you know, we're not really your mom and dad. And so same thing, they definitely struggled with the when and what time. As far as how it is now, I'm 27 now, and I have a wonderful relationship with my mom and dad who adopted me. They saved my life. So for me, for me to sit and be upset with them, I can't get myself to do it. It's something I wish I kind of would have known, but I also look at it from their perspective, and I can sit here and be upset about it, but then I really think about it, and they gave me 23 years of peace, of not knowing the ugly and the trauma that I did endure.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have no memory at all of anything before living with your parents or your adoptive parents that you know now?
So I do have one memory. One of the biggest factors is the senior year video. I graduated 2014, and they ask you for a baby picture, a newborn picture, middle school and high school. Well, my whole life, I've never seen a newborn picture of myself, and I had always wondered why. I never did get myself to ask, because I look like my adoptive dad, and I look like my adoptive dad's sister. And so my whole life, I was just like, there's no way this isn't my family. This is all I know. This is, my whole life. And I vividly remember my senior year, I had turned in a picture of me when I was 4. My mom and dad adopted me when I was 4. And that's all I had. And I did turn that in. And the girl who I turned it into was like, she kind of laughed at me, and she was like, we need a newborn picture. And I was like, well, you're going to have to make that work. And I just turned around and walked off. And that's kind of been a moment that has stuck with me ever since. And that's really what kind of got my mind jogging. And so, thinking to my childhood, the only memory that I have was a specific smell of a garage. I remember this white house. It was my second foster home that I went to. There was a white house, and then there was a tractor that sat on the right. And they happened to turn their garage into like a playroom. And I remember the smell of that garage, because growing up my whole life, I had always been looking for that smell. Like, it sounds odd to say out loud, but when I would go to my friend's house, or I would go to family members' house, like I would try to figure out a way to get into the garage, because I had been looking for that smell my whole life, and I didn't know where it came from. And so after everything come to the surface, and I hunted down, all of my family and all my foster care families, I sat with the second foster family who had taken care of me, and I remember I was like, we were in a white house, weren't we? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, there's a tractor that sat on the right. He was like, yeah. And I was like, I need to go see this house. And he sent me the address, and I went out to that house, and it's abandoned now. And driving out to it and looking at it, I don't vividly have a memory, but for some reason the garage door was open, and I was like, golly. And I remember just kind of sitting in my car for 30 seconds, because everything my whole life that I had been hunting for was probably sitting right in front of me. And I got out of my car and I walked into the garage, and I had found that smell that I had been looking for.
Wow. Smell is such and one of those things that we remember some of that, and we don't remember I had no clue how we remember all that. That's such a powerful sense, but something that you have been chasing as the definition of home. Oh yeah, we forgot to introduce our second co-host here today too. Baby girl's going to join us. So sorry, people, if you hear some hollering.
Great.
She's just not terribly happy today, so you're going to hear a little fussing.
We got shots yesterday, but I mean, back to smell. Smell can be so powerful. A while back, me and the kids were in the store, and I had found this lotion, and it was my grandmother's lotion, and so I mean, I had to buy it, and I brought it home, and I kept smelling it, because that smell brought her back to me. It brought back so many memories. So smell can be so, so important.
So I'm curious, did you go into the garage at all? Did you spend any time there?
I did. It was all stripped out. And then there was just dirt on the ground. And I don't know what the foundation was, but it was gone, and it was just old, and the wood had been rotted in it. And I stood right in the middle of it, and I was like, golly, like, I finally, and the smell it just amazes me. It still lingered. It was still there.
Let's just hope that smell that you're so attracted to wasn't some sort of chemical landfill that was there beforehand or something.
Right.
But yeah, that's amazing that you're able to find that and get that piece of your history back into your current conscious life, because man, there's so many parts of our childhood that for a lot of us just don't stay in the memory. I don't have a lot of conscious memories of my own childhood. I don't have a real good reason for that. Not some specific traumas necessarily, but just that I don't. And so having some of those memories being brought back are awesome whenever you can. So that's amazing. So, I want to talk about your bio family just a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
You have had a chance to meet them, you said, right? Or at least part of the family?
I have. Yeah, I've
what
gotten
has
to meet some biological. I'm sorry?
What has that been like for you as you've researched who they are and figured some of that out?
It's truly has been amazing. I've accomplished some of the greatest accomplishments I think I will ever be able to be a part of, searching for my family. I've gotten to help reconnect all 6 siblings. I found out that I'm actually the 3rd oldest of 6. I had no idea. I had no idea that I had all these siblings or even, biological parents. I thought that I was with my biological parents. And I've gotten to meet some aunts and some cousins along the line. And it really has just been a wonderful experience.
Now I'm curious, as you've walked through that, have you got the chance to really build any of those connections with your biological mother and father?
So there's a lot of ups and downs, with finding a family. I'm a very curious person. And so the second I found out, I was just gung ho, like 100%, let's do this. And, I've kind of had to learn the hard way to not be so pushy about things. And unfortunately, not knowing my biological parents, I've always said I will never say a negative word about them. I didn't know them. I didn't know they existed. I didn't even know their names or what they looked like until I was 23. The first picture that I ever saw of my biological father was his mugshot. And so that's kind of something that hits home, that hits deep. And then as far as my biological mother, unfortunately, she has passed. And I never got to meet her.
Wow, that's tough. Having that taken away. Have you had a chance to at least meet your bio dad?
I have not. I have been in contact with him. It didn't really go the way that I thought it was going to go, and I did ask my biological sister. We have the same mom and dad, and I asked my sister what her relationship was with our father, and she pretty much told me to not push that relationship. And so until she does, I probably won't either.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, that's amazing. You said you're one of 6 siblings, you said?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have a lot of connection there. Have you made all those connections?
I have. We have. I'm actually the third oldest of 6. And so when I found out about my adoption, there was a foster family who had put together a scrapbook for me. And when I opened the front cover, it didn't say Morgan Wolf on it. And seeing my name in front of a different last name, again, is something that I will remember for the rest of my life. That it just struck me to my core. And I was going through pages, and they had kept a lot of my artwork. And it was just house after house after house that I would draw. And I was like, why did I draw so many houses? And they were like, Morgan, all you wanted was a home. And so I was flipping through pages, and there was a picture of a little girl in there that looked like me. And I was like, well, golly, this is true. There's me in this book. And that's when my dad was like, no, Morgan, that's your sister. And my adoptive parents did try to take my sister with me. Unfortunately, just due to circumstances, it didn't work out. And so I was the only one that was pulled and went through the system. And so I actually just, the world of Facebook, I totally have a different perspective of the world of Facebook. I just it was 10 seconds. I typed in her name and there she was. And she looked just like me. So it really, it wasn't hard. It was not hard to find her because we looked just alike. But, and I messaged her that night and I was like, I don't know how to start this, but I'm your sister. And because I didn't know what they knew either. And so I was going into it kind of easy, and she messaged me back that night. She was like, "Oh my God, like I've been looking for you for 20 years, and I've always wondered where you went and all that sort of stuff." And she asked me, she's like, "Have you gotten in contact with the second sibling?" And I was like, "What?" This was before I knew that there were 6 of us. And I was like, "No, like I'm a little late to the ball game here. Like right now, I don't even know who I am. And I just now met you." And she got me in contact with the second sibling. And so I contacted her that night, and kind of the same thing. They both have been looking for me my whole life. And I have even seen my Facebook post of my sister writing my name in a sibling search, for like National Siblings Day. She stated, I'm looking for my sister Morgan. I think she was born in 95. She was taken from my mother very early. And, if anybody knows where she is, can you please let me know? And that was a Facebook post that I saw of my sister looking for me. And so I got in contact with her, and she was really excited. And she was like, "Can you help us find, the 4th oldest sibling?" And I was like, I was kind of stressing for a minute. And I was like, I just, need a minute to kind of take all this in. I don't know who the 4th sibling is. And when I get something in my head, I cling to that. And I'm like, golly, like, what if I were to just try to find the 4th sibling? And I did. I put her picture on my Facebook, and I was like, this is my sister. She's the 4th oldest. And, if anybody knows where she is, can you just help me find her? And ironically, it was about 3 days later, some lady in Indiana messaged me, and she said, "I've paid for a high search in database, and I think I found your sister because of a birthmark." And she sent me the profile, and I live in Tulsa. And my sister, the lady in Indiana, she found her, and she lived in Broken Arrow. So that put all six of us together.
That's amazing. Yeah. So I assume you guys are all originally from Oklahoma.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that would be super weird if you were all originally from New York and you ended up in the same state. Yeah, that's just so amazing, And when our son, when his stepbrother found him, he found him through I think it was a 23andMe or Ancestry search, something like that. That's how they found each other. And in today's world, because of all the DNA stuff, like, we can find people. These are not the thing, people have for decades, since the beginning of adoptions, really, we have not had near as much access to finding people like this ever. This is just a whole.
It was amazing. Yeah. I mean, she lived in Indiana. She was like, "I found your sister. She lives in Broken Arrow," like the same state I was. And it was an amazing accomplishment to help my siblings kind of end that 20-year search.
Now, was Morgan your original birth name?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Sometimes they change names entirely. Sometimes they don't. And, I don't know that I can really speak to whether or not that's appropriate or not, or good or bad, or, discuss all of that. But I know that it can be a thing.
Yeah. I am very happy that my adoptive parents kept my name, because I do know that my mother did pick that name, and that my name now is kind of more important to me, because I do know that came from her, at least.
Yeah. And, with one of our kids in particular, we changed the entire name, but mostly because of the people associated with that. It's actually kind of a family member. And by kind of, there's steps and halves and all that involved, but, kind of a family member, not blood related, but related through family. And some of those people are, we'll say, dangerous to be kind, people who all like to dress in the same color and tend to hang out and do things that are not necessarily legal. And we're like, we don't need any easy connection there. I don't. For sure. I don't need a bunch of gang members showing up on my doorstep to deal with. So we did change the name because of that reason. But other than that, we've we have really been careful about how we handle that because it's so very difficult.
For sure.
As you've met your family members, I'm just curious, what is that like for you? And do you think you would have benefited from an open adoption? Because obviously you haven't had the opportunity to really make those connections with your parents, but if you were the only one taken from the home, certainly your siblings did have some of that connection with them and know a lot of stuff. So do you think you would have benefited from an open adoption where you would have still had the ability to meet and see them through your years of growing up?
Personally, I don't think that I would have benefited from that. The number one thing people ask me, are you mad at your mom and dad for not telling you? Are you mad at your mom and dad for not telling you? What I have found out is from my biological family is it wasn't anything that would have benefited me growing up, going through those teenage years, trying to focus on school and things like that. And so I go back and forth. It really is a battle of, here's my root, here's where I come from, but then here's the family who saved my life and made me who I am. And it truly is one of the biggest battles I think I will ever go through.
So if I take you back to the, we'll say 14-year-old Morgan, do you think that if you'd had that to deal with at that age, because, we've got lots of kids, and I know, 14 is one of those ages where a lot of kids are struggling just with biology because, puberty and life and all that stuff. And there's something about that, middle school, high school age kids that really struggle in that time frame because you've got a lot of stuff to deal with. If you were to ask that girl, do you think she would agree with you today? Or I'm curious, what do you think your perspective would have been as you struggled through that?
I think it would have been the same because even dealing with it at 23 years old, I didn't think I was going to snap out of it. I was in the middle of vet tech school. I am a vet tech and I specialize in animal rehab. And when I found out when I was in the middle of school, and even some of my instructors at school pulled me into their office and they're like, Morgan, like, what is wrong with you? Like my grades definitely were slipping. I just wasn't focused. I wasn't there because my world had just flipped upside down within a matter of seconds. And I was trying to figure out who I was at 14. Golly, I couldn't have handled it. No.
Well, that's not always, the way that we think in that moment, but it's great to hear that you've realized that, and you understand how difficult that is, so as you've met your siblings and some of your extended family, is that connections that you continue to grow today?
I do. Yeah. I can text some of my siblings right now if I wanted, and to know that they've spent their whole life searching for me. It's so bizarre to just be like, hey, here I am. So yes, I am an aunt. My biological sister, she has 2 little girls and a little baby boy on the way. And so I do get to be a part of their life. I visit with them and see them. With everyone kind of being raised different, it's definitely not that family dynamic that I wished it would have been, but it's definitely, it's good. It's nothing too bad.
Well, I'm just going to say I could text some of my family members today who wouldn't even respond to me. So don't feel too bad at all there, because you're probably doing better than I am. And I was raised my entire life with those siblings. So,
right.
Yeah, family's a tricky thing sometimes, especially when you throw things like that in it. And it sounds like you not knowing what your situation was exactly when why you came into foster care. But I'm just going to assume that there is some level of trauma that comes through that, whether it's just the loss of first family or some other piece of abuse or difficulty, whether, abuse, neglect, drug abuse, these are alcohol abuse. These are all the things that are oftentimes, young kids deal with. And so as you look at that and you look at your life, is that some traumas that you've dealt with over the years? Have you been to therapy to figure out what some of those trauma triggers are and responses, or is that something you've been pretty fortunate not to deal with throughout your life?
So, yeah, that's funny you asked that, because my whole life, my childhood, the only thing I remember is being with the Wolves, my family now, and traveling across the nation for baseball games. Like baseball, I love baseball, and my brother played. And I think that's why I like baseball so much, because that was my only childhood memory. Because by the time I had memory myself, I was already with the Wolves when we were doing the whole baseball thing. And so growing up, I had this perfect childhood. Didn't go without anything. Always had a roof over my head, bed, food, clothes. I did not go without anything. So learning what I went through, knowing that it was the exact opposite, definitely it is hard to handle. Like I said, I will never say a negative word about my biological mom and dad. I didn't know the lives that they led, but they did. They spent the majority of their lives in prison, drugs, alcohol, and I've seen it all. I've looked up their names on the whatever website that is, that where everything's public, and I've seen every charge. I've seen it all, and to know that that's what I come from, really is something unique. But as far as living through that trauma, I personally don't remember any of it. I've always kind of wondered why I've had anxiety my whole life, knowing that I've had this perfect, stable childhood. And I've always just kind of been on the anxious side of things. And now that I know where I came from, I think it does make sense, because they talk about, babies, infants acting out and going through trauma, and you can kind of tell. And so I think that is truly where a lot of my anxieties came from. But the reason I went into the system was, I don't know what the circumstance was. I don't know what all led to this, but basically my biological father was trying to run off with me, and I was in the back seat of his car, and he wrecked that vehicle. And so of course we went to the police station, and he had tried to run off with me again. And so he grabbed me by the arm, and we were running across the parking lot. I had scrapes and bruises all over me. And so they again caught him. And so we went back to the police station, and that's when the social worker showed up, and the social worker was just calling foster family after foster family, like, can you come pick up this little girl? Can you pick up this little girl? Can you pick up this little girl? And finally a family picked up, and they dropped everything they were doing, and they gave me a home for about a year and a half. My sister Leah, she was not with me. And so that's how we got separated. That's how I got pulled from the family.
Wow. As crazy as that story sounds, you and Amanda share a little bit of common story there. Amanda was actually kidnapped by her biological father as a, how old?
I was an infant, around 6 months old.
So yeah, she's, you'd think that would be less common, that you wouldn't have a couple of people meet who've been through that same exact crazy story. But, right. There's the book by, I forget, it might be Dan Siegel, but it's, if anybody wants to find it, you go to on our website on fostercarenation.com. If you click book resources tab, there at the top on the website, or under the menu button on the mobile stuff, there's a book there called, The Body Remembers, I think is what it is.
Yes.
And it talks about the effects of trauma, especially, in ones as little as 6 months old, and how that trauma affects you just, in very large ways as adults sometimes. And you don't necessarily have to remember it consciously. Your body remembers it. Some brain science about the way that trauma affects the brain is just amazing. So yeah, that's
my mom, she's always told me how big of a fit thrower I was. Would just scream bloody murder for no reason. She always tells me I was the biggest fit thrower. And looking back, I'm so thankful for my adoptive parents to have not given up on me, because I was a terror of a child when I was little. And I know why I was.
And they probably had no clue, because let's see, you said 27 now? So that was more than 20 years ago, and none of that science was really out in the open. Nobody really knew anything about all of that. And that's,
right.
Hey, this kid should be
talked about either. Nobody wants to admit that they need help. Nobody wants to admit that their child needs help and that, they're failing as a parent is what they feel. And it's absolutely not that. You're not failing as a parent. You're just trying to figure out how to meet your child where they're at.
Yeah, for sure.
And in the foster and adoptive system, oftentimes you don't know where they're at because we only know the amount of trauma a kid's been through by what somebody has witnessed and told the authorities, and the authorities have told you. And there's lots of places for that to fall apart and you not hear important pieces of information. But there's also the stuff that never gets reported, that never gets told. Yeah. We had one particular kid with us who was a little bit older and, with us for a very short time. But in that short time, in the conversations we were able to have, I will guarantee you there's part of that kid's story that has never been told. I'm pretty certain that they had experienced a decent level of decent is the wrong word here, but, a healthy level, no, an unhealthy level of sexual abuse. There's not a good way to say that phrase, but had been through some stuff that they had never told anybody and nobody had a clue about it. And I could kind of see hints of it, little pieces, little parts. And they never disclosed to me, and I never said anything to that child about it either, because if they weren't ready for it, I'm not the person to uncover that for you. My PhD in psychology is completely experimental, and I wrote the paper, my diploma out with crayons. So yeah, it's not a very valid diploma to use and say I can deal with a kid in that kind of heavy trauma. So I did not chase that with them, but I know that's something that there was something there.
Yeah. It definitely opened my eyes, like going through what I did. It definitely opened my eyes on the number of, foster care statistics and trauma and abuse that this nation really does go through. And it's not talked about.
Yeah. We're just starting to get to the place where, there's a handful of podcasts out there about foster care and adoption and the trauma that occurs inside of that. There's not a lot in there. There's not a lot for people to know. And we meet people in this world, and we assume that person just, they're just crazy. I don't know why, I don't know why Morgan at work is always so anxious. I don't know what her deal is. She had a perfect life growing up. I don't know what her deal is.
Yeah,
and people will think those thoughts because they don't understand how little of what we know about a human is the full truth.
And even just in my situation, like, it really is such an honor to be here with you, because my only prayer has just, finding out that I was adopted at 23 years old, like what I would have given to have been able to talk to someone right in that moment that had found out late in life like I did. And my only prayer to God has been like, if you get me through this, like I promise, like you're gonna have to give me a reason to help people. Please lead me to help people. And that's when all my Miss Oklahoma stuff fell into place, and my whole platform is foster care and adoption. And so you to help me get my story out, it really does mean a lot to me.
Yeah, that's a huge piece of what we do. Oh, baby girl's not very happy about what you've had to go through either. She's telling us all about it. But yeah, it's really difficult. Sorry, we're going to have to tell her to be quiet. Amanda, could you tell her to be quiet, please? But no, that, you tell the story, and I think my big question is, because you framed it up perfectly for me. At some point, there's a pivotal moment somewhere in there where you went from being a victim and consciously chose to be somebody who's out there being the vessel of help for others. Like you can stay the victim your whole life. I have met 80-year-old men who are still the victim and hate the world, and are angry and are grumpy and are crotchety and nobody likes them. And if you knew their childhood story, you probably feel sorry for them, but they spent 80 years ruminating over that hard stuff. They never got to the point where they decided, I'm going to go help people and make my pain count and make this pain into something beautiful. So I'm curious, what was that moment for you that said, okay, this is hard. This is difficult. I mean, everybody knows that having gone through that shift would be difficult just to realize all that in your life. But what was it that made you turn and go, now it's time to make this worthwhile? I'm going to do something.
Yes. Yeah. So I vividly remember that moment. I was having a rough day at school, and, I was still kind of in the middle of figuring out who's who in my biological family, and, asking a lot of questions about my biological mother. Like I said, going into this, I was very curious. I've spoken to a lot of people that find out, kind of later in life, they don't want anything to do with it. And I definitely was on the flip side of that. I was very curious. And so I was just asking lots of questions and just trying to figure stuff out. I just staying up all night. I was just driving myself insane, trying to put this big puzzle piece together that I was 23 years late to. And so my pivotal moment was the day that I saw my biological mother's urn. That was the day that I said, God, you're going to have to lead me to help people, or I'm going to go insane. I said, I can't do this. I physically, I can't do it. So seeing my biological mother's urn, definitely, because that's pretty much the closest thing that I'm going to get to knowing who she was, what she looked like. Like, I have no idea. I've been able to see a few pictures, but that was my moment that I was like, all right, I cannot go down this dark hole.
Okay, so I'm going to have to ask this question next. That not to wax too awful religious on anybody here, because I don't try and push my own spiritual beliefs on anybody, but there is that chapter in, I think, Ephesians, where there's a benediction in there that says, to him who is able to do more than we can, exceedingly abundantly more than we can ask or imagine. So what is that? What is your exceedingly abundantly more than we could ask or imagine that God could put you in a place to do? What is your I could be ecstatic if I could make this kind of a difference?
So one of my favorite quotes that I've came across through going all this is, it states, "You have been assigned this mountain to show others that it can be moved." And that quote kind of got me through a lot too, because, how lucky am I to have gone through the trauma that I did, but then end up with the amazing family that I was placed with. Like that, a lot of times that doesn't happen. And so I felt like I needed to take advantage of that. I wallowed in my self-pity there for a little bit, and I got real angry and bitter about it. And I finally was like, Morgan, you have been blessed with a wonderful family, and be thankful for it. Shortly after that, I do work with a group that's called Storybook Princesses, and I've been casted as Jasmine. And so we do like little girls' birthday parties, events, meet and greets, and pictures and photo ops and things like that. And so, how cool is it to make these children happy and them not know anything of what I've been through?
Well, that is awesome. That is awesome. Yeah. Because I love it when I see people who've been through hard things, who've been through that tough spot, and have chosen to make some sort of beauty for others come out of it. That's been such a pivotal decision in my own life. Most of the listeners will know, but, that we lost 7 years ago. Yeah, it's almost 7 years ago. We lost our oldest daughter. And I want to say that was one of the hardest things for me, is to figure out how to take that pain and turn it into something beautiful. And if I can do that, if I can turn that pain into something beautiful, whatever you've been through, you can do the same. It's just the way I see it. Anybody can find some beauty in some hard places if I can. So yeah, I love that you're doing that. Who in your life embodied that for you and helped you realize that that's the better way to be, rather than to be the victim?
You're asking who instilled that in me?
Yeah, who helped you learn to be that way, as opposed to, because we all know somebody who's been through something and they have been the victim that for their entire life. Who taught you not to allow that to be your, victim to be your name?
Honestly, just my family that I was raised with. When my adoption came to the surface, it was as much as of a traumatic event as it was for me, this involved the whole family, and so it was kind of like that sit down moment, family, big crisis talk. I remember calling a lot of my family members and, telling them that I know about my adoption now. And because the whole family knew, my whole entire family knew. I did have little cousins that didn't know. And so, aunt and uncles had to sit them down and kind of talk about this family crisis that everyone had just went through. And so I definitely went about it from trying not to be selfish, because as much as this impacted my life, this also changed my whole family and what my parents had to go through. I couldn't imagine the seat they were in. When do we tell her? When do we tell her? When do we tell her? How do we tell a little girl all this trauma she's been through? And, we don't want her to feel different. And so I definitely kept my family's emotions in my head as well.
Yeah, that's one of those things that most people don't think about because, mostly people who hear about it, a kid who's found out later in life about having been adopted, they say, well, why didn't they tell him? Why didn't they tell him? And, understanding that side of it is really difficult. So I love to hear that, you found some grace for your parents in that moment and understanding how difficult it is for them to figure that out as they walk through it.
Yes. Yeah.
When you had first contacted me, that was one of the first things I thought about was I'm like, oh crap, that's almost, that's so very similar to our son's story. And, like I had mentioned before, fortunately he was fairly graceful in the way that he handled it. It was not something that, as a matter of fact, before that conversation was over, one of the things he said to us was, Mom, Dad, this doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
He just...
when I was with my second foster family, one of the big things that will stick with me, what my dad had told me, was my dad that adopted me. So my mom and dad, adoption, foster care was not even in the realm of their thought process. And they happened to go to this church. And that's when they saw me, because I used to go to church with the second foster family I was with. They would take me with them. And my dad tells me that I was in the front pew and that I would turn around and I would just look at them. And so they left that week and then they came back the next week. And that second time I actually got up from my pew and I sat right in between them. And so, of course, that kind of reeled in my mom and dad who adopted me, and they started asking around about me and my story. And all I had was, another thing that's not talked about is the foster care children that they don't have anything. I had this little suitcase, this little pink suitcase, with some shirts and clothes in it. And that was all I had. And word for word, when I found out, my dad said, Morgan, we weren't going to let you live in a suitcase anymore. We were going to give you a home.
Wow.
Well, and I can tell you from a parent's perspective, because we've been there, there's no intention of harm. It's not something that's done out of malicious nature.
Right.
And I can tell you, I was terrified. I was so terrified when our son found out that he would be so angry with us, particularly me, and I'm so thankful for the way that it went. But I understand the parents that are out there that are struggling to tell their children these things. Yeah. And since we had this experience with our son, we have every placement that we have taken, that we have adopted, they know their story. They know their story, the pieces that we have. They know they're adopted. We never want to make that choice again.
Right. Yes. It's a big balancing act that I have, because, I think that if I kind of would have found out a little bit sooner, I probably wouldn't have went through the hardships that I did. And then I look at the big picture and I'm like, well, Mom and Dad, they saved my life. And so for me to sit here and be mad at them, I can't get myself to do it. And as far, my number one goal with this is to just, because earlier you had asked me, how do I get through it? Why did I choose to be what's the word? Like, how do you choose to be more supportive through it? And it's just, I just want to be that hand to help someone else through it. I know that I have to handle it well to help someone else. And I just don't want anyone else to go through this alone. They find out late in life.
Yeah, it's definitely a strange place to be put in your life. And you know, like as Amanda said, it's not a choice that most people make maliciously. It's really because we make them as parents. One of the few times we'll admit this. And kids, if you're listening, I hope you're much older when you run across this podcast and you'll understand it better. But what you need to know is we're kind of clueless. Just because we're mom and dad and adults doesn't mean we have a clue what the heck we're doing. You know, and we're doing the best we can. And that's one of the things, you know, because my parents raised us in some ways that I will disagree with today. And I also know that they were kind of clueless, just like us.
Yes,
they didn't really know what they were doing. They were doing the best they had with what they had, you know, and so it's one of those lessons I think helps us mature as we learn that about life. You know, I remember for years wondering when I was going to feel like I was the grown up and the adult who knew what was going on. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think I get to be that guy. Maybe if I make it to like 70 or 80, I'll feel like I know what the heck I'm doing, but I haven't gotten to feel that way yet. So what would you say to someone else who is in your situation who maybe just found out that something was going on in in their life, and they may or may not have to search out the family the way that you did, that something could be going on in life? Well, how would you encourage them? What would be your best piece of advice?
I think that I would truly ask them what they wanted to come from it, and I would support that answer, because, you know, to tell someone that's going through this, you know, don't look for your biological family. There's a reason you're in foster care. They're not good people, yada, yada, yada. Because I got told that a lot too. They were like, Morgan, there's a reason you're pulled from that family, so you don't need to go after them. And again, that's just like struck me to my core, because whatever I would tell them, whatever you want to find out, you work hard and figure it out, because you don't want to spend the rest of your life wondering. And that was kind of my motive, to get all this figured out, because I didn't want to spend the rest of my life wondering. If I wouldn't have even tried to find my biological sister, the fourth one, you know, none of this, the sibling reunion may have not have even happened, you know? And so I truly would just support them in whatever decision or whatever route they wanted to go down. That's
amazing. Then I have to just, you know, because we're running out of time here, but I want to, you know, also how do you go from the little girl who was pulled out of her home, went through foster care, ended up going through the adoption thing, and finding out you're adopted and all, and then turn into Miss Oklahoma?
Again, I'm going to try not to cry through this one. I truly do think that, you know, God pulled me through this. You know, I remember being on my lowest point. I said, God, you're going to have to pull me through this to help people. And that truly is what, not long after is when my Miss Oklahoma stuff fell into place. And, you know, my family definitely pulled me through it as well. I think one thing I would tell people that are going through it, you know, go ahead and search everything that you want to find, do it, figure it out. But on the flip side of it, you also may find out some things that you may not want to know, and you need to be prepared for that.
As I mentioned before, this is so much of a story of pain being turned into something of beauty. And so I just want to commend you for sharing your story of how you went from a kid who was thrust into a situation of no fault of your own that caused lots of pain and anger, and probably later resulted in a lot of anxiety and probably anger. I don't know. I'm a boy. I know young boys, we tend to go through more anger than the girls do sometimes, but not always. But you turned that in, you made your way through that and found your way into something beautiful. And you're sharing your story with the world and helping to encourage other kids who've been through that. And I think that is just a beautiful part of your story.
And what I want to end with is, you know, as much as I do give credit to God, I do see the flip side of it, because a lot of my friends and stuff know what I've been through, and they're like, oh, God saved you from the situation and you have a family and da 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 da. And it's like, yes, that did happen. But I also think of my, siblings and other children who did not get pulled from that situation. And, it's almost like a survivor guilt situation. Because I'm like, why was I the one to be pulled from the situation I didn't need to be in? But all these other kids don't get pulled from that. And so it certainly is just the cards that you were given, and whatever cards you were handled, just try to play the best of it, because you may never know what happens. I never in my wildest dreams did I ever think that I would become Miss Oklahoma, and you just play the best of what you've been given.
So I have a question. Now that you're Miss Oklahoma, what are your plans? Do you have plans for the future? Are you maybe considering some foster care or adoption in your future?
I don't know. I haven't really thought much of that. I'm currently single. I not married, don't have any kids of my own. So that's kind of down the line. But as far as my Miss Oklahoma goes, even after my reign is over, I do plan on volunteering with a group that's called the Tulsa Girls Home. And they do house girls that have aged out of the foster care system, because there's also that whole ordeal. There's a lot of children in foster care, but then there's a lot that age out of it, and they're just very lost and just need help. And so right now I am kind of volunteering with them to kind of help just be a mentor. And I really do plan on just kind of digging heavy into that and just really sharing my story and saying, hey, this is what I've been through. This is what can come of it if you, make the correct choices and things like that. Once my reign is over, I do plan on, doing volunteer work, but I don't know. I think maybe one day if I get married, I think I would try to run again, but we'll see what the future holds.
Well, it's good to see that you have a plan, because Amanda and I are always crazy people who always bring it back to that. Single people can be foster parents too. Just so you know. Maybe not you. Somebody else needs to hear that when they listen to this.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's one of those little pieces that a lot of people don't realize. So I always like to throw that stuff out there. We all have a reason why we can't do it, but not everybody understands why they should be doing it. So if it's in your heart and soul, to anybody listening, if it's something that you feel that is pulling you, tugging at your heartstrings, feel free to reach out to us, ask us a question, find out your local DCS, DHS, DFS, DIFS, whatever it is, CPS in your area, and learn something about it. If I can, we'll help you as much as possible. If you just, fostercarenation.com, you'll find us over there. And my email is jason@fostercarenation.com. So we always try to help anybody who has any questions around that, because, it's always a part of somebody's thought process. Just yesterday, I had a friend of mine who mentioned to me that his wife was talking about thinking about doing foster care and or adopting, and he had some questions, and I'm like, dude, you've got my phone number, just call me, put her on the phone, we'll talk together, we'll do a conference call, we'll Zoom, whatever, I'll talk to you about it, because it's something that you mentioned. The need is huge. Over 500,000 kids. Yes. Well, I think it's right at the 500,000 kid mark that are in the foster system right now in the U.S. And the number of kids who age out, the stats are not good. So many of them end up, instead of group homes, they end up in prisons because, of all the problems that come into kids' lives when they don't have that family structure around them to keep them on the straight and narrow.
For sure. Well, you guys are doing good work yourself.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for taking your time to share your story today. We really do appreciate it.
For sure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, Foster Care Nation. Thank you for listening to Morgan's story. Now take her knowledge and wisdom to heart so you can create love and healing in your family and community. Be sure to come back next week. We have new episodes every Tuesday. If you'd like to share your story as a guest, you can reach us at jason@fostercarenation.com. You can connect with other like-minded people on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/fostercareuj. And don't forget, we have a Patreon account where you can support our mission for as little as $5 a month. It's at patreon.com/fostercarenation. The links to everything are in the show notes in your podcast player or at fostercarenation.com. And as always,
you are so super awesome. I think you go so cool. Yeah. Thank you for listening. Thanks.
Unparalleled Studios.